In 2023, one of the biggest YouTubers in tech found themselves in chaos. A channel that had built a reputation from transparency, trust, and entertainment was suddenly under fire for ethical lapses, internal scandals, and the kind of public backlash no creator ever wants to face. I've been watching Linus Tech Tips for years. Honestly, he's one of the reasons I started creating content myself. Back then, it wasn't a studio, it was just Linus, a camera, and a pile of PC parts. He was awkward, fast-talking, but definitely sharp, and you could tell he loved tech. Linus started out working for a Canadian retailer called NCIX, where he made videos for their YouTube channel. In 2008, management let him start a side channel called Linus Tech Tips, so he could post lower budget videos that wouldn't hurt their main brand. He took that opportunity and ran with it. By 2012, he'd had enough of corporate limits and left NCIX and started their own company, Linus Media Group, or LMG. It was just a few people in a garage, Linus, Luke, Edsel, and Brandon. They didn't really have a business plan, just the same thing that drove a lot of channels back then: to film, edit, upload, and then do it all again. As YouTube's tech scene exploded, Linus Tech Tips was everywhere. PC builds, unboxings, experiments, tutorials. He did all of it, and he did it fast. He wasn't trying to sound too corporate or too perfect. He just talked about tech the way that most of us wished we could. His audience responded. By the mid-2010s, LTT was one of the most recognized tech channels in the world. Linus was uploading daily, and everything he touched seemed to work. His garage operation turned into a full-fledged studio. Lots of new faces joined the team, and before long, Linus Tech Tips got bigger than just a single channel. It grew into an entire network. LMG spun off a whole lineup: Tech Quickie for fast explainers, Channel Super Fun for off-the-wall challenges, Tech Linked for news, Short Circuit for quick product hands-on, and later MAC Address, They're Just Movies, and even a gaming news channel. Each one had its own host, its own rhythm, and its own loyal subscribers. Then came merchandise, and things really changed. LTTstore.com sold more than just t-shirts. It became a full-fledged retail brand. They had custom-designed hoodies, water bottles, even their own screwdriver. It was really clever branding that worked. The company ballooned to more than 60 employees and pulled in millions of views a day across all its channels. Linus became the face of tech YouTube, trusted, likable, and accessible. The WAN Show, his weekly podcast with Luke, made him seem even more grounded. For a long time, it felt like Linus Tech Tips would never slow down. But there's always a cost to scaling up. When you build an empire as big as this, something eventually starts to fall down. For Linus Tech Tips, that something was quality. You could start to feel it around 2021 or 2022. The uploads kept coming, but they started to blur together. Videos turned out faster, had a lot more sponsors, but the information they gave wasn't always right. It became less about precision and more about volume. For a channel built on trust, that can be a dangerous trade-off. The first real sign of trouble hit in March of 2023 when hackers took over LTT's YouTube channels and started streaming crypto scams. Every creator's worst nightmare. Linus has always been careful, but the attack came through a false sponsor email, malware hidden in a PDF. Within hours, their videos were gone, replaced with scam live streams. They recovered the channel the next day. The hack would look small compared to what happened next. In August of 2023, everything hit the fan. A company called Billet Labs had sent LTT a prototype water block. It was a one-of-a-kind piece of hardware meant to cool a specific GPU. LTT tested it on the wrong GPU, got some inaccurate results, and instead of retesting it, they decided to publish the video anyway. And if that wasn't bad enough, that same prototype got auctioned off later by LTT at a charity event without the owner's permission. On its own, it could have just been a mistake. Unfortunately, it wasn't the only one. Tech reviewer Steve Burke from GamersNexus released a video that pulled no punches, accusing Linus Tech Tips of rushing content, cutting corners, and letting accuracy take a back seat to output. And the truth be told, he wasn't even wrong. For years, Linus Tech Tips had been posting nearly every day across multiple channels. I don't think they meant to, but there was some carelessness. In that channel I mentioned, GamersNexus didn't just catch one mistake, they caught a pattern of mistakes. The reaction was immediate. Fans who'd trusted LTT for over a decade suddenly had doubts. Linus tried to defend the team in the forums, but the tone missed the mark. Then he had to walk it back and issue a public apology. The company released a video called "What Do We Do Now?" admitting to the mistakes, apologizing to Billet Labs, and announcing a temporary production pause to improve internal processes. It was a good move, the right thing to do, but the apology felt half-hearted because the video, they monetized it, and it had sponsors and even some jokes mixed into it. For a lot of viewers, it felt like they were treating the situation like more content instead of accountability. The damage was done. Linus Tech Tips wasn't as untouchable as they had hoped. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, they did. Just days after the GamersNexus video dropped, an ex-employee named Madison Reeve posted a long thread on X detailing her experience at Linus Media Group. She said the company had a toxic work environment and that she'd been harassed, belittled, and even physically touched inappropriately by coworkers. She claimed management dismissed her complaints and told her to put on her big girl pants. It was a brutal post to read, and it spread like wildfire. For a company that had built its image on being family-friendly, it was definitely devastating. Linus said he was in shock and that her description didn't match his recollection. They immediately hired independent investigators to look into the claims. Sponsors went quiet. Fans debated whether this was in fact the end. To LMG's credit, they didn't try to hide it. They paused production, brought in outside counsel, and promised to release the findings publicly. Months later, the investigation concluded that the most serious claims weren't substantiated, but the investigation did find process errors and mishandled communication during her time there. By then, though, the damage was done and the trust was just gone. The audience was wondering what happened behind the scenes, and that was something that they just couldn't take back. When LTT finally returned, it just wasn't the same. The videos were still posting and it was still high quality production, still had the familiar faces from before, but the tone was definitely different. You could tell that people were watching them more closely. Strangely, Linus had stepped back from being CEO and Taryn Tong took over daily operations. They had their own warehouse, their own product line, and a ton of loyal subscribers that still brought in millions of views, but none of that could fix their reputation. 2025 came, and so did more controversies. GamersNexus started reigniting old plagiarism claims. Other people were pointing out mistakes that never would have been called out in the early days. And the sad part is that the original version of Linus Tech Tips, the one that I used to watch, the one that felt personal and genuine, well, it just never came back. They weren't failing financially. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It just wasn't the same anymore. They were more corporate than they were independent creator, and it was just really hard to root for them the same way. The other part of this story that kind of tells even more about what's going on inside Linus Media Group is the people that have left. Over the last few years, an unusual number of recognizable faces have walked away from LMG behind the scenes. Some departures were framed as amicable, others were complicated. The audience is starting to wonder if there may be a problem. Take Alex and Andy, fan favorites known for their engineering projects and chaotic humor. They left to launch their own channel, Zip Tie Tuning. After being told to either hand over their side project or shut it down, instead, they chose to leave, so technically it was a firing, but it's one that came with a severance and a clean break. Within months, their new channel passed over 100,000 subscribers. Then there's Jake Tivy, the network and server specialist. He built some of LTT's most ambitious products, like the Whale LAN and Linus's smart home systems. He left to start his own channel as well. The departure hit harder because Jake wasn't just another host, he was the infrastructure guy, the one who made the impossible builds work. In both cases, LMG tried to manage these exits behind the scenes, and maybe that was the point. They've developed a sort of amicable firing process, kind of way to release popular employees without lawsuits and without open conflict. If so, it's a smart HR move, but it's also a sign of how big and cautious the company has become. Then came the strategic cuts, business decisions disguised as hiatuses. Jonathan Hurst, the host of MAC Address, was laid off after the Apple Focus channel underperformed. A serious motorcycle accident had already slowed him down, but the message was crystal clear. If you're not bringing in numbers, then you can't stay. Even Etzel Jago, one of the original Garage members who helped Linus start it all, was quietly let go. Losing an original founder to layoff says a lot about how far LMG has moved from its startup roots. The list goes on. Dennis Leo, a decade-long editor turned personality, left after years of being the creative glue behind so many iconic moments. Emily Young, a writer known for her deep technical expertise, departed in 2024 on good terms, but her absence added to the sense that the old guard was fading out. Even the two Collins, who were both beloved behind-the-scenes fixtures, well, they moved on too, reportedly due to cost of living pressures that made Vancouver a tough place for mid-level staff to stay long-term. Depending on who you ask, these departures mean two very different things. Some say LMG has become a talent incubator, a place where creators learn the ropes, build their skills, and branch out to succeed on their own. From that perspective, then this is healthy, that the company helps people grow. Others see it as a revolving door, a sign that the workload, pay, or atmosphere might not be as copacetic as the brand projects. The truth probably sits somewhere in between. Linus Media Group built its empire by putting personalities front and center, but that strategy has a built-in flaw. When you elevate talent and make them recognizable, you also make them very valuable to the audience and to themselves. And eventually, some of them will take that value and leave with it. And as far as recently, Linus has taken to his own podcast to complain about views being lower. They've hinted that maybe it's a YouTube issue, but honestly, to me, it feels more like audience fatigue. You can only push the same shows about the same topics for so long before people start getting tired, especially when every video feels like a long-form ad and has been run through the sponsorship machine over and over. Sometimes there's one sponsor, sometimes there's two, and they're all fighting for the same attention. I don't hate Linus Tech tips. In a lot of ways, I owe part of my creative drive to them. But I stopped watching around the same time a lot of you did, when it felt like quantity mattered more than the quality. When every video started feeling like a paid sponsorship and they didn't slow down enough to get things right. Linus built something incredible. He turned a one-man YouTube channel into a multi-million-dollar media company. He created jobs, built communities, and inspired an entire generation of creators. But at some point, the soul of what made it special got lost in the shuffle. Maybe that's inevitable. Maybe it's just what happens when success grows faster than the people inside can adapt to it. It's what happens when the people who once felt like underdogs become the establishment. When the drive that built the brand turns into the pressure that ends up breaking it. And the truth is, I don't think we've seen the end of this story yet. Linus Tech Tips is still here, still massive, and still influential, still shaping how millions of people see tech. But it's also a reminder that no creator, no matter how big, is immune to burnout, backlash, or bad decisions. The rise was inevitable. The fall didn't happen all at once. Instead, it was a slow burn, and somewhere along the way, the biggest tech channel on YouTube stopped feeling like one of us and started feeling like one of them. Linus built his channel on trust and authenticity, and it rose to the top of the tech world. But in the end, the spotlight got turned right back around at him.